Coinage's Crypto Project of the Year celebration is back, spotlighting the top projects in crypto, including the leading Layer 2 network built on top of Bitcoin. Stacks is looking to unlock DeFi for Bitcoiners, offering new and innovative ways to bring smart contract functionality to Bitcoin. After tripling in 2024, Stacks is bringing excitement back to the OG blockchain. Which nominated project deserves to be crowned crypto's Project of the Year? You decide. Head to coinage.media to vote. All right, back on Coinage with us, but this time, the first time as a nominated crypto project of the year as we spotlight Stacks. Excited to have back on with us today, Muneeb Ali from Stacks, co-founder over there. Muneeb, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me again.
It's been a while. There's a lot of things to cover because it's been a bit since we had you on last time, but this time, as I said, we're highlighting the top projects in crypto in our community, nominating Stacks for, I think, a lot of good reasons, and excited to highlight those and what you guys have been building this year. So first off, congratulations to you and your team and your community for kind of everything that we've seen come out of Stacks. But Muneeb, for those who don't know Stacks, why don't we just kind of start with the idea, the thesis of building DeFi for Bitcoiners, this idea of everything that happened in Ethereum and beyond to see this DeFi boom now swinging back as the attention, I think, is squarely on Bitcoin in 2024. For those who don't know, how do you describe what Stacks is all about?
Yeah, I think Stacks is a Bitcoin L2. The way to think about this is that Bitcoin is simple and durable by design at the L1, and it might be a bit slow. It might not be very programmable, but those are the things that you like in digital capital. You want it to be secure, durable. You don't want Bitcoin to change like 30 years from now. But that doesn't mean that you cannot deploy Bitcoin capital. So there you can move your BTC from the layer 1, L1, to L2, which is Stacks. There are a couple of others as well. Stacks is one of the major ones. And then your BTC is faster, cheaper, but more importantly, programmable in the L2. If you have used Ethereum or Solana, you can do swaps, you can lock your BTC and earn a yield on it, or basically take a stablecoin loan. So you can do all of those things with Stacks with BTC capital. So instead of using ETH capital or Solana, you can actually do these interesting, cool things with BTC. And I think that's what makes Stacks unique and makes it very, very exciting.
Yeah, it does. And as we discussed last time you were on, a huge opportunity now as the size of the pie has continued to grow in terms of money flowing into Bitcoin. This year, I think it exceeded a lot of people's expectations. I'm not sure if it exceeded yours, but I would assume so, since we're approaching almost $30 billion in terms of inflows for the Bitcoin ETFs in total. And I think that just makes the opportunity here even larger. So, I mean, the token, obviously, this isn't the only thing that matters in terms of our crypto project of the year, but looking at the charts, Stacks up more than 200% since last year. Muneeb, when you look at kind of the opportunity as you present it, how large has that become in terms of empowering the ability to unlock the value for Bitcoiners?
Yes, I think to put things in perspective, Bitcoin now has $1.5 trillion more in capital than the next project, which is Ethereum. The difference is 1.5 trillion, right? And the bigger thing here is most of the Bitcoin capital is actually not deployed and is not productive. It's not earning yields. It's not actually getting used. It's mostly in cold storage and is just sitting there. So that's the massive opportunity. It's not even, that you're working with $1 trillion of capital. It's coming close to $2 trillion of capital. And it's by far the largest, most secure capital base, and the markets are reacting accordingly, right? And I think people need to think about it this way, that we still use email. Email is old technology, but we still use it. There hasn't been a replacement for email, right? So when consolidation happens around a protocol, the number one thing just wins everything. And I think that's what we are seeing with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is digital capital. People are putting their capital there because they want to preserve capital. In other areas, you're always losing money. If you buy a car, the value of the car is going down. If you're keeping dollars, the value of the dollars is going down. So Bitcoin is the digital way to preserve your capital. And once it starts taking off, everyone would want to keep their capital in the most secure place, not the second most secure place, not the third most secure place, but the number one place, right? And I think as that plays out, the amount of capital available to developers who actually want to come in and build with these things, the opportunity just keeps becoming bigger and bigger. And I feel like Stacks is on a very, very early stage, because we are still like building the infrastructure, right? We'll talk more about the Nakamoto upgrade and SBTC, but those are some of the fundamental building blocks that the developers need, and they're just going live, just barely going live right now.
Yeah, and the way that you're doing it, I think, is also pretty interesting. As you said, we can get into some of those integrations beyond just kind of siloing everything to just Bitcoin, but also now integrations with some other projects in the rest of Web3, which I think is pretty interesting. But Muneeb, when you kind of look at the way that Stacks has been perceived by the market relative to what's been happening with Bitcoin, looking at, kind of the way that they've traded in step earlier in the year, I think is pretty interesting in terms of you guys outperformed Bitcoin back then in Q1. Things maybe flipped a bit in Q2 and Q3 as you guys continue to build. And I think just the excitement around Bitcoin really does swing that way. And, there's a relation between Bitcoin moving higher and then altcoin season usually following. It's interesting to think about Stacks tied into that too, because it's not an altcoin necessarily, but it's also a project that's highly levered to Bitcoin. So, I mean, for you as a founder, how has it been just in terms of, I guess, people waking up to the opportunity with Stacks as a project? Just given, like we said, how much money has flown into Bitcoin.
Yeah, so I think basically the chart that you were just showing, the way I look at it is that there was a ton of excitement building up around the launch of the Nakamoto release, which is something the community and the core devs have been working for almost 2 years. And then there was a delay, as with any complicated project. Sometimes I describe the Nakamoto upgrade as it's like trying to change the engines on a plane mid-flight, right? So Stacks, the legacy version was already live, and core devs were working on the major upgrade, which is almost like launching a new chain. It's much
Mm-hmm.
faster, new consensus. It uses 100% of Bitcoin security. So there was a lot of like buildup of interest right around the March, April time, which was the original timeline for the Nakamoto launch. And as with any complicated project, you discover things, you need to do more testing, you need to build like a few things here and there. There was roughly like a 6 month delay that I think caused sort of like, builders being like, oh, I have to wait 6 more months, the market and the investors sort of like being like, oh, we'll wait for this to actually ship. But that has happened as of now, right? So Nakamoto went live, the launch was smooth, everything's working fine. There's some more network performance upgrades that are coming along with the big launch of Sbtc. So I wouldn't be surprised if the market took in this delay of the release, and now that the launch is live and it's smooth, the market sort of like reacts again that, okay, this thing has been de-risked, it
Mm-hmm.
actually live, and people can come in and start building with Bitcoin Capital.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about, we mentioned Nakamoto upgrade, but maybe we should dig into the specifics of it. And you mentioned Sbtc as well in terms of the things that might start driving usage on chain, users as well coming back in. I mean, what does it enable? What should people know about it, right? We talked about it a little bit last time you came on, but now as we kind of look at, I guess Stacks revenue on chain as well, this is something that I think might also be included in that as more people can do more things with it. So what should people know about the takeaways now that we're post Nakamoto upgrade?
Yes. I think the best way to think about the Nakamoto upgrade is we think of that as solving a UX problem around Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is sort of like always going to be slow, always going to be a little clunky to use because it's an old technology and no one wants to change it. The value of Bitcoin is in durability, that it's going to be durable. Bitcoin is going to be the same thing 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. But that doesn't mean that we cannot build new types of rails, call them L2s, that are much faster, much cheaper, and they give a much better UX experience to users for using BTC, right? Another analogy that I use is your Bitcoin on L1 is kind of like cold storage. You aren't doing much with it. You're just keeping it, holding it in your wallet. But if you want to play around with your BTC, if you want to move it to a hot wallet, if you want to buy NFTs or trade it or lock your BTC, then you come to the L2. So we're solving a UX challenge, which means that our L2 needs to be much faster, like in the order of seconds instead of 10 to 40 minutes for Bitcoin. But we want to maintain Bitcoin security. And that's a very hard technical challenge to solve, which Stacks solved. So you get 100% of Bitcoin hash power securing the transactions that happen on the L2. Like as soon as a Bitcoin block comes, Stacks follows like Bitcoin finality, meaning that all that hash power, and Bitcoin hash power has only been growing in the past years, is now
Mm-hmm.
actually securing everything that you're doing on the L2. And I think that's massive because you compare that to the security of any other chain. Bitcoin is by far the most secure thing, right? And now Stacks is effectively secured by 100% of Bitcoin hash power. So that thing already went live. The fast transactions already went live. And now the big thing that we are working on is a safe, decentralized way of moving BTC capital from L1 to L2, and that's Sbtc. So you lock your BTC on the L1, and you basically get this asset called Sbtc, which is one-to-one backed by Bitcoin in a decentralized and open way, and you can use it on the L2. And when you want to take your Bitcoin back to the L1, there is this decentralized group of signers. There are many institutions that are signers as well, like BitGo, Blockdaemon, and 20 others, and they basically help sign your withdrawal. So you go back to the L1 and take your BTC, and it unlocks on the L1 for you. So that I think is the main thing, that now you have the good UX and the core consensus and fast speeds live. I think the next big unlock is going to be Sbtc, which is scheduled to go live in approximately the early weeks of December. And I think that's what I call when Bitcoin capital would actually become getting deployed, and we are very very excited about that.
Yeah, I feel like almost, the stack story is so interwoven with the Bitcoin story. And the big thing there, the big thing there has been, it's not just users in terms of Bitcoin scaling with users and the idea of it being kind of money for the internet, but also with money itself in terms of how much money flows in. So it's kind of almost a two-pronged equation, is you can have users or you can have capital flowing in. I assume more for like you guys though, users do matter. What have you seen from that front in terms of, what you guys are trying to capitalize on? Is it still kind of both sides of that equation, or are you still just kind of like, hey, look, even if we have someone who comes with a bunch of Bitcoin, that's going to be a success? Or do you still want to see kind of like a broad user base as you build this out?
I think it's both. So Stacks already has, let's call it, like more than 1 million users. Like just one of the wallets, Leather, has reported more than 1 million addresses being used. So I think there's obviously we're not at like 10 million or 100 million type places. Stacks is still early, but we are seeing great signs of early users, and these people are also deploying capital, right? So there's approximately $1 billion locked in Stacks consensus right now, and these people earn BTC rewards. So in terms of like, does it need to be both? I would say yes. If we absolutely have to pick one, I would rather first go with a lot of Bitcoin capital deployed, because I think more Bitcoin capital deployed is just a signal to developers and other users that this is where BTC economy is really taking place. If I have to pick one, I think I would rather start with a lot of BTC capital, because that's just going to end up attracting more capital and more users anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's been interesting. Like I said, there are a lot of things to celebrate, not just the Nakamoto upgrade, but also kind of recognition from others in the crypto space as well. Grayscale talking a lot about you guys in terms of kind of, I think, giving it the hype that that you deserve in terms of it being one of those top projects, and institutional investors, I think, as well, included in that in terms of saying, hey, look, this is something that is important and has high growth potential. Sean Farrell, one of our members at Fundstrat, constantly talking about you guys as well. But it's not just kind of like building on, I think, the recognition that has come from Bitcoiners, but also bridging the gap to others. And I think that's worth highlighting as well in terms of your, I guess, interoperability. I don't know what the right word to use. The description here is, Muneeb, when it comes to maybe extending the bridge to Aptos and Solana and some of these other growing ecosystems. But how do you envision the way Stacks fits in with not just Bitcoiners, but the rest of Web3?
Yeah, so I think on the first part, I do think we are very proud of this ecosystem that is getting the reputation of being sort of like the blue chip Bitcoin L2. Like all the top investors or partners who are integrating, like they're sort of like coming to Stacks first, right? Like if there's only one that they're going to do, like Stacks sort of like becomes the obvious choice, and we're very grateful for that. And I think a lot of hard work sort of like went behind doing this. If you remember, Stacks was the only project that did a SEC qualified offering back in the day. And even recently, we received a letter where the SEC, even under Gensler, sort of like took a closer look at the project, and then ended up issuing a letter that, hey, like we kind of like didn't find anything wrong. So I think that's sort of like very high bar for being transparent, doing everything fully in a fully compliant manner, attracting a lot of like large institutional investors in the early days. like I think it all adds up, right? You attract like the right talent, the right builders, and just have this ethos of like we're always going to do the maybe the hard but the right things, and I think you start building a reputation around it, which matters. And the reason why it matters is that the way I see the market for these wrapped Bitcoin assets, they might be a little bit similar to how the stablecoin market actually worked. For a stablecoin like Tether, they have treasury bills and they issue the stablecoin against it. With systems like Sbtc on Stacks, you have BTC that is the backing everything. So Bitcoin gets locked and a wrapped BTC asset gets issued. And there are going to be many of these out there. But I do think that the asset that is the most liquid, has the best sort of like brand name and trust, and is available everywhere. Like you can go in and out of it easily. It's on every exchange. It has deep liquidity. Like that's the one that's going to like start dominating, because if people have to pick, like if you have to pick between USDC, Tether, or some very small stablecoin, most people will
Hmm.
just go for the bigger one because they know the brand name, they know that it's highly liquid and it's available everywhere. So I think that's the sort of thing where the brand name of Stacks and the capital and the resources of Stacks are actually going to help SBDC, which is a great thing. And that takes us to these integrations as well. So we focus on bringing BTC from the L1 to a more programmable place like the Stacks L2 in as secure a way as possible. SBDC is the only sort of like asset that's secure at the consensus level, right? So think of that as this is what we specialize in. That how do we bring Bitcoin capital to a more programmable place like the L2? But there's no reason to stop there, right? So if Aptos wants to have a Bitcoin asset there as well, they don't have to go and redo all the work that Stacks has already done, right? Like we've been focused on building on Bitcoin for years and years now, right? So we specialize in that. But the other ecosystems who also want to deploy Bitcoin capital can just come and connect to Stacks and take SBDC to their ecosystem. And I think
Hmm.
that just sort of like helps everyone, because as SBDC becomes more liquid, more easily available on these other emerging ecosystems as well, it just expands the market cap and the liquidity of the asset.
Yeah, you guys are, I mean, obviously, like I said, as that opportunity grows, I think a lot of people have woken up to it. There are a few other projects also building in the space in terms of, I think, offering Bitcoin backed stable coins. Similarly, we, are highlighting another crypto project of the year just because it is, I think, such a huge opportunity. Mezo and Thesis, what they're doing as well. There's also Core, which has gotten some attention recently. I mean, when you kind of look at the competitive set, Mooney, what do you kind of point to most often in terms of, I guess, A, differentiating, but B, since this is Crypto Project of the Year and you're on with us, saying why Stacks is better than maybe the other options out there, or at least what makes you most proud of what you've been able to do this year?
Yes. So I think in terms of the Bitcoin wrapped assets, obviously WBTC by BitGo is the largest one. But I think Coinbase launched CBBTC, and I think
Hmm.
given the weight of Coinbase, I wouldn't be surprised if that asset becomes more popular. But there's a key difference, right? Like the Coinbase asset is KYC'd, and you're completely relying on one company. You're trusting one company with your Bitcoin, right? So there's a market for that. Like let's just call them centralized assets, and then there's going to be a large market of the decentralized assets. And I think Saks SBDC is one, and I think TBDC, as you mentioned, is another one. It's already live. I think they're built a bit different. Like TBDC is a project that is basically comes from Ethereum. Is very focused on Ethereum. I know they're trying to do other things as well. Whereas Stacks is like deeply integrated with Bitcoin L1 itself, right? Like so, the way to think about TBDC is like an app that's running on top of Ethereum, whereas Stacks is sort of like at the consensus level of Stacks. SBDC is embedded, and if something goes wrong, like for example withdrawals are like temporarily not working, like it will literally like be a chain halting event, right? Like everything will stop because this is the highest level of security you can give something. So the SBDC asset will be secured at the consensus level, not the V1 that's coming out, but the V2 that comes out after. So I think there are many technical differences, but I also think that there's just a different target market as well, right? Like for
Hmm.
example, a lot of the Bitcoin holders or the maxi type holders who only trust Bitcoin and nothing else, right? They're not going to mint something on Ethereum, right? Like that's just not in their culture. Whereas our target user is people who want to stay close to Bitcoin, who only trust Bitcoin. So Stacks actually follows Bitcoin security. Bitcoin's finality. It's built like in a very, very deeply integrated way with BTC in a way that makes a lot of Bitcoiners who would rather not use anything else other than Bitcoin much more comfortable using Stacks. So I think the target market is a little bit different. The source of capital is a little bit different as well.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned source of capital, and you also touched on, I think, the sign off, shall we say, from the SEC looking into Stacks and the securities offering, and then saying everything's kosher, and now having a larger discussion to be had about the full, I think, pivot that's happening in the U.S. when it comes to regulation. And a lot of people in crypto are excited about that. I was wondering though, Muneeb, when you think about all these ETFs sitting there. We had SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce on the show not too long ago talking about Ethereum ETFs and the idea that they weren't allowed to stake, the underlying Ethereum in those ETFs, and how she'd be open to potentially revisiting that decision. Same thing, I wonder, for Bitcoin as well. Like I said, there's a lot of money now in those ETFs, and I'm sure the issuers and custodians are wondering what could happen there. I mean, what are your expectations from a regulatory perspective as another tailwind here in 2025? Maybe potentially also boosting the mission you guys are on. What do you envision on that front? Could it even be possible that maybe eventually some of the Bitcoin held in custody under the ETFs could eventually be approved to do things such as earn yield on Stacks?
Yes, I think it's entirely possible, but it's also like not a roadblock. Like in the sense of like there's so much Bitcoin capital out there. Like less than 1% of that is deployed right now, right? So it's not that the ETFs would be need to be the first customers of deploying capital, but it's okay if they take a little while, go through all the regulations, and hopefully with the new administration, maybe that process could be faster, right? And that would be another unlock. But I feel like the Bitcoin capital is not the bottleneck. The bottlenecks have really been, the technology and the underlying infrastructure. And I think we are finally sort of like getting to a place like once SBTC is live, once some of the network performance upgrades that we're doing, that's live. And there are a lot of other L2s, and a lot of them haven't launched yet, right? So Stacks is obviously was early, and we were able to do this upgrade. But there are a lot of newer L2s. They raised capital. They're doing test nets right now. So there are going to be a lot of like different venues for deploying Bitcoin capital. And I think I'm one of those people. Like I want to see the entire market grow. I want to see the entire Bitcoin L2 market grow. Because if you look at the relative market size, like ETH L2s are something like 80 billion, and Bitcoin L2s are 4 or 5, and I think Stacks might be like 80% of it. And we want to see a place where the entire market of L2s grows to like 50, 100 billion or more. And I think you need a lot of players for a category to grow as a category. And I think
Yeah.
so. I feel like a lot of BTC capital is sitting out there idle. And I think that's likely not actually going to be the bottleneck even.
Good point. That it doesn't need to be immediately perhaps the most regulated in the Bitcoin ETFs. You're right that there is still a lot of Bitcoin just floating around out there unutilized. When you look ahead to 2025, part of the crypto project of the year, the piece of it that our community and the audience is always most excited about is looking ahead to maybe the alpha, the things that maybe not a lot of people are aware of. I mean, when you look ahead to 2025 on the Stacks roadmap, we'll start there. What has you most excited? What should people know about what you have around the bend that might also continue to carry over the momentum we've already seen in 24?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty excited about like a ton of different partnerships. Some of them are public, like with the Aptos one that we talked about. But basically, the general category is we want to see SBTC integrated everywhere. You should be able to trade in and out of it. We want to see deep liquidity of the asset. And I think there's a ton of like interesting work around like incentive structures or also around like partnerships and integrations that I'm like sort of like very, very excited about. And it's a decentralized ecosystem, right? The work is happening. People who want to find out more, they just need to like join the working groups and actually get more information that way. The other thing I'm pretty excited about is how Solana is working on basically improving bandwidth and latency. I think now Stacks is at a similar place. Like we have decoupled from Bitcoin blocks. Now Bitcoin blocks happen every 10 to 40 minutes, but Stacks blocks are already happening in the order of seconds. But I think there's no reason to stop there. I think we need to keep increasing the network capacity or bandwidth and keep decreasing latency. And I think as we do that, the UX for Bitcoin around the world actually goes up. Like imagine if websites or other applications, even like coffee shops, if they start integrating Bitcoin payments, and they're doing that on the L2 with Sbtc, they can have a very fast, very smooth experience. Your transaction is always going through and with cheap fees, and it's really, really fast. I think that is something on the roadmap, to something as simple as keep increasing the network capacity so that we can keep onboarding like, tens or hundreds of millions of users, and keep improving the latency, because it just makes the experience that much better for using Bitcoin. And the one last thing I'll drop out there is that in terms of onboarding more developers, there are some pretty exciting things. Maybe Rust-like programming languages. It's not like fully confirmed, but there has been enough discussion in the community around it. So right now we use Clarity, which is a very safe language, but there are some discussions that can be also support something like Rust that more developers know. So that would actually maybe help onboard more developers onto Stacks as well. So those are some of the things that are at the top of my mind.
Muneeb, I got to say congratulations to you guys, and congratulations to the Stacks community and everything you guys have done this year. Clearly very well earned in being nominated for the first time, one of our crypto projects of the year, and we'll see what happens as voting continues. But Muneeb Ali, co-founder at Stacks, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, and excited about the future of Bitcoin L2s.